Do you love classic Macintoshes as much as I do? Do you have several machines, or at least one machine, that exhibits weird symptoms, like, for example, randomly freezing, failing to boot, coming up to a black screen? These are all issues that I had with this LC2. This is my Mac Classic, and when I got it, it had some really weird symptoms. Number one, the floppy and hard drive controllers would only operate sporadically. The audio circuitry was in a really bad place. It would only produce a very small amount of audio through the built-in speaker. Some pretty scary symptoms, but they're all very fixable. One of the problems with these older Macs has to do with these surface mount aluminum can style capacitors. When these capacitors get old, they get leaky. Now, these capacitors are filled with an electrolyte solution that is conductive, and although you can't see it, there's a rubber seal, or there's a seal of some sort, may not be rubber, but there's a seal between this metal can and the little plastic backer behind it, and this can is crimped around this plastic piece. And what happens is, as these capacitors get older, that seal can fail, and the electrolyte will slowly ooze along these little contacts here, and it'll eventually cover that area of the logic board. And you've got a cluster of these in one area, and they're all leaking, and you've got a lot of electrolyte just oozing out in places. In some more extreme cases, it can cause corrosion. So a lot of times these caps can cause issues in really random and bizarre problems, I might add, just because they're leaking. And it actually works in two ways. Number one, you've got a conductive oil-like solution all over the board that can short out components, but not completely, not to the point where it causes damage, but to the point where it causes weird symptoms, like microphones not working, or a floppy drive controller that works, but only when you boot it off of like in my Mac Classic, if I booted it off the internal Mac OS 6 OS, which is built into ROM, the floppy drive controller would work, but if I booted it off the hard drive, it wouldn't be visible. It was the strangest thing ever. Well, the good news is you can fix this problem pretty easily, if this is the problem. And most of these Macs have this problem just waiting to surface. Downstairs I've got a Macintosh LC575 or a Performa 575 that has signs of leaking capacitors, although it still functions completely 100%. That'll be the next one to do on my list. But today I'm going to show you how to basically replace one of these caps so you can restore your Mac to its original functionality, or prevent it from getting that bad in the first place. It's one of those procedures that I only really recommend if there is a problem, or if you see electrolyte all over the board, because there will be a problem. It's a pretty easy thing to do. You only need basic tools. I use a soldering iron. Basically, we're going to use a standard, I think it's a 40-watt iron. I think it's a 40-watt. 25-watt iron, but it's got that nice broad tip which really helps conduct heat. You'll need some rosin soldering flux or paste. I use this stuff. It's cheap and used to be easy to get, but now the Radio Shacks are pretty much non-existent these days. But you can buy any soldering paste that you like. You're going to need some desoldering braid, needle nose pliers or forceps, leaded solder. I use leaded solder because it flows nicer. And of course, replacement caps of similar or exact value. Now, where do you find a list of capacitors that your Mac uses? Well, that's pretty simple. There's a website called maccaps.com. Maccaps.com. And this site has a very easy to navigate chart of what capacitors your Mac uses. For example, they cover the Macintosh SE power supply, the Color Classic, the Next Canon magneto-optical drive, the Mac SE30, the Amiga A400, 4000, Sega Game Gear, Macintosh LC575, LC550, Quadra 610, 605, and there's more. They've got basically the entire early 90s, 1980s lineup of Apple products. The Classic 2, there's a handy one. They've also got the Classic and the LC 1, 2, and 3 power supplies, the LC, really just about every Mac that you're going to come across that will have this problem. So let's get started. We're going to take this Mac LC2 apart. We're going to put the motherboard right there, and I'm going to show you how to replace the caps yourself without paying someone gobs of money to do it for you. Okay, so just to recap, we're replacing... Hey, get it? Recap. Anyway, we're replacing a couple of 47 microfarad 20 volt surface mount aluminum caps. So right in this cluster here is where our audio circuitry is mostly, and I think this is a good place to start. It's also the hardest to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some soldering paste. We're going to take a brush or cotton swab, and we're going to just swab around the area of the capacitor that we're replacing. I'll start with this one here. The flux helps to distribute the heat more evenly to the solder pads, which are under the cap. We're going to clean our soldering iron tip with a soft, wet sponge. So I'm going to heat up that point right there on the board. I'm going to gently rock the capacitor off the board like that. Then I'm going to go to the other side and do it again until it's free. Trying not to tear the pads off the board. It's always a challenge. There we go. That might be a better idea than what I was originally going to do. Yeah. And now it's off, just like that. Put it aside. So positive is always going to be the side that doesn't have the black mark. So these caps have a little indicator. It's a little black mark. Let's see if I can get that in frame. That black mark indicates negative, and the can body is your positive. So then we're going to take some desoldering braid, and we're going to clean the pads up the best we can. Then we're going to grab a new cap and put it in its place. But first I'm going to take the rest of these caps off, and then I'm going to go and add the new ones. And I'm going to have to do this again because I have these other little caps to replace too. Oops, we're not doing that one yet. There's only two in this area. There's just two of them. If there are more. Let's try that again. There is a website that lists every cap used on classic Macintosh systems. Pretty thorough too. Almost every model that commonly has cap issues is covered by this guy. And I can't think of it right now, but if you do a quick Google search for, Macintosh classic capacitors, it'll come up. There we go. No pad damage. That's kind of a success right there. We did no damage to the underlying pads. That's a success. But we know that when the electrolyte begins to leak from these caps, it is conductive, and it can cause weird things to happen. We which is what was happening to me here. There is a 100 microfarad 6-volt cap right here. It's the only one on the board, and I have no idea when I'm going to get that one in. So, but we're going to start with these 5 caps, and then we're going to go from there. I'm going to get some new solder and just get some new solder on these pads. I'm using leaded solder. That's all I ever use. Replacing a light bulb. So then it's basically installation is the reverse of the removal. I'm going to just get some flux on here. There we go. And you just kind of drop it down by heating up each pad until the cap is flush with the board. Couldn't be simpler. And then just give it a gentle rocking test. One of the things that I like is these pliers here help to remove some heat. They act as a bit of a heat sink. You're doing this. Actually hear it hit the board. There we go. There's one down. Let's do the next one. So I'm going to put a little bit of flux on the pad. Don't worry, flux is non-conductive. And I'm going to grab the cap in the right direction. With my pliers, and I'm going to just drop it down. Making sure that it is absolutely straight, of course. Oopsie. That goes in this way. You don't want to get these pads too hot because what will happen is they can actually detach from the board. There you go. That's pretty much it. These two down. Clean our tip. Now we'll go to this side of the board. Make it easy to see. I'm going to, and once this is all done, I'm going to clean the board again to remove any flux. Make it look nice. I'll take these ram chips off so you can better see what I'm doing. Point it towards me. More like that. So yeah, once again, we got 3 more here. I'm just gonna get my paste on there. Ripping the stitch. And if you want, you know, you can certainly pop the board back in a few times during this process to make sure that nothing is messed up. So if you end up having a problem in the end, you can check your work step by step. You know, so you can say that, well, it worked until I installed the new cap for C2. And then you can at least go back to C2 and just check your work. Of course, if you see smoke, well, it's too late for you, probably, if you short something out by accident. It happens. Everybody makes mistakes. Even Louis Rossmann. Although not very often. Okay, 2 and 3. Let's get these out of here. I did check pricing, by the way, on the LC2s and 3s, and it is a little depressing. They haven't reached cult status, you know, so anything I do to this machine is really just for my own sake and not anybody else's. I'll never really get to make money on it if I ever decide to sell it off. Oh, maybe I will, but it's not really in the plans anyway. All right, and we take our desoldering braid once again, and we are going to clean up our pads. I'm sure we could probably reuse this solder for the next cap, but I decided not to. Start fresh. Like Subway. Jared? Who's he? We're starting fresh. I don't know what you're talking about. No, we totally did not have a multinational pedophile as our mascot. No, that never happened. Fake news. Fake news! It did happen. Who's Cherry? Subway. Start fresh. Alright, let's see. Let's get some flukes. We'll have to pull more caps from our little container strip. These are surface mount machine strips, in case you guys are wondering. Some of you don't really know how electronics are manufactured, and that's what I'm here for. So these little strips they look like projector film, and they're loaded on roll, or they're actually coiled around rolls. So there's this comes in a roll about the size of a 55-gallon drum lid. Big giant rolls. And this machine that installs a pick and place machine, which is programmed to place, you know, this part on this point in the board. What it does is this little machine takes these strips in, and it's early, okay? I just woke up. That's why they most often when you buy these caps in certain surface mount parts, they come in strips or in rolls, depending on how many you buy. Okay, I'm going to start with C2, C3, then C4. Oopsie. Hey, the machine still starts up and runs after this. Cool. I think it will. And just like we did over there. Heat up the tank. And as you do more of these, you will get better. You will improve. Before you know it, you're recapping like a pro. But if you're not comfortable doing this kind of work, that's okay. Especially if you're working on more valuable systems. Like, for example, if I had a 20th anniversary Mac, okay, and let's just say I had to do this job on a 20th anniversary Mac. There's a lot at stake in doing that. And screwing it up would cost, well, a lot. You know, a 20th anniversary Mac is still worth, you know, a couple $1,000, not a couple thousand, at least $1,000 in good working condition. A friend of mine just bought one, as a matter of fact. and he paid like $1,500 for it. I'm like, okay. More than I'd ever pay for a vintage machine, even if I was a millionaire, but that's all right. You know, he wanted one bad enough and he bought it. But if I had to recap that machine, I wouldn't. I would definitely hire that one out to somebody who has more experience. Why? Because the stakes are high. And I'm not a pro. I don't purport to be one. And mistakes happen. And I'm more likely to make one. Now these are a little more accessible, a little easier to do. I like that. I like it when things are easy. Oops, I'm melting my power connector. See, mistakes happen. Put a tack there. Put a little tack over here. Like that. Okay. Go back to the other side. See, this one is actually coming out a little bit better than the classic that I did just a couple months ago. Yeah, this one's coming out way nicer. So I think my skills have gotten better. Practice makes perfect. Before you light anything up though, do make sure that your polarity is correct on all your caps, because if you screw that up, you will likely cause severe damage, and it'll be more than a recap the next time around. It'll be way more and way more expensive. Oops. Let's try that again. Yeah, if you screw up the polarity on anything here, yeah, you're gonna cause issues down the line, frying chips and stuff, and you might just be better off with a new board. I wish my fingers were made of asbestos so I could grab these a little bit better. Let's see what we can do here. Well, like I said earlier, you know, if you're not comfortable doing a cap job on a machine, you can send them out. I know V Westlife did, and you know, he just didn't want to mess with surface mount stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. I get it. You know, if I think I would have done the same thing. But I'm the kind of person who, you know what, we're not dealing with super high value here. I mean, if I blow up this board, I'm out, what, 50 bucks? I mean, I can get a whole new LC, I can get an LC3 for like $30 with cosmetic issues, and I have a good shell here, so, you know, I'm not that worried about it. Okay, so these are done. I'm gonna mark them off. Clean my iron, of course. I'm gonna put marks on them so I know they were done. I used a black mark, so like when I get the inventory for the let's see, for the 16 volt 10 milliamp, or 10 microfarad 16 volt caps, I'm going to put black marks on all of those, and then I'll make sure that I get all those done. So now that these are all good to go, let's just light it up and see if it works. Okay, here we go. Ooh, we have sound. We have a screen. And there we go, we got a cursor. Now, one of the problems that we had prior to all this madness was the microphone never worked at all. So let's see if we can get the microphone back. Now, I did pull the pre-RAM battery, so we've got a black and white screen, so I got to reset my monitor preferences, but that's okay. We still have all those little caps that need to be changed out. But those, I expect those in next week, and we'll do those later. Now those are a little more delicate because you have to use smaller diameter solder to avoid overloading the pads. Just FYI. Okay. See if our microphone's back. Nope, not yet. I should see some sound there, but I got nothing there. It is entirely possible that we could just have a bad microphone socket. That would not be out of the question. But I still think that there's, see these little caps here, these are all, many of these are related to the audio circuitry, and I think that might be the problem. So, well, anyway, we got that much done. So now when we get the other caps in next week, I'm not going to bother filming that, but hopefully we'll get the results on camera at least. And there we go.